So we meet this morning at a critical time for our nation and the businesses that make us thrive. Now, on the left-hand side of this screen, you will see the coat of arms for the Institute of Directors. And if you look carefully, it's quite small print, you'll see integrity and enterprise. So the Institute was started in 1903, and I'll be saying something right at the end of this presentation about the history of the Institute and the guy who started it. And I'll also leave you with some thoughts about enterprise. But the essence of the IoD is integrity and enterprise. And in a 40-year career as a business lawyer, I've seen a lot of enterprise. And often I have to say it's not been matched with integrity. And that is then a challenge for all of us working in that community. And I think as never before, our country and indeed the world is going to need both enterprise and integrity. So our subject this morning is business rescues and restructuring in a COVID-19 world. And we're talking about the do's and don'ts in that environment in which we find ourselves. Now, I'm struggling to move the slides on. Does that mean I didn't set it up properly?
You should be able to scroll through, James.
Oh, it's not scrolling.
Okay, in that case, close it down and open it again and just move to the next one.
Oh, right. Actually, just before we deal with the formalities, you will see that we have here a list of all of the delegates. I'm not sure everyone's managed to arrive, but there we are. So, business rescues and restructuring in a COVID-19 world. So I'm delighted if I can exit. Right, so I'm delighted to welcome on the panel with me today 3 people. So on the top row, first of all, I'd like to introduce Nikki Holt. Now, Nikki is a co-founder with me of an organisation called Sofie Enterprises, which has only just been born, and it's going to be looking to help local businesses in West Oxfordshire. Next, I'd like to introduce Frank Wesley of Quantuma. Give us a wave, Frank. Then Richard Rendell of RP Rendell Associates, and V. Barakta.
Hi guys.
Thank you, V. So as a cautious corporate lawyer, I've spent my whole career suggesting to business owners when there's the possibility of insolvency in their business that they really ought to go with me and see an insolvency practitioner. Because what Frank and Richard are formally called is licensed insolvency practitioners. Now, V, whose husband is Frank, by the way, V is not a licensed insolvency practitioner, but she used to work for licensed insolvency practitioners. She's very experienced, and her focus is very much on the directors and their personal affairs and bankruptcy law. So when I say to my clients, well, you ought to think about seeing an insolvency practitioner, generally they're not happy with that. And often people think of insolvency practitioners as the undertakers of the corporate world. Now, I think that's completely misplaced, and the rescue and turnaround culture that Frank, Richard and V embrace is all about trying to help people restructure and save businesses. So it's critically important, I think, when you've got a difficult circumstance that you do take the time, take stock to understand where you are.
James, may I just interject there, just because one of the housekeeping rules, if you like, I just need to let everybody know we will be recording this session and making it available to everybody post the event. But if anybody, for any reason, does not wish to be recorded, then obviously they are welcome to turn their microphone off and also their video off for the duration. So it's just really to let you all know that. And now I'll let you get back, James.
Thank you for interrupting, because that was the prompt to say I had forgotten to press the record button.
But I already have, James, in the background.
You already have?
Yeah,
it's recording.
Yeah,
it is recording. I can
it is
see
recording.
Well done. So, what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask each of our three panelists to give us their golden nuggets. I always think as a practitioner, it all seems so complicated when you come to something new, but someone who's got a deep knowledge of a subject can often give a really important insight for those of us who might be concerned about the need to speak to an insolvency practitioner. So I'm going to start with Frank and ask Frank, you've been 30 odd years as an insolvency practitioner. You started in 1990. What would you tell our attendees today are the two key things that people should bear in mind when they find themselves in a difficult situation?
Yes, indeed. There's naturally a resistance, I think, to sitting down in a room with me as a licensed insolvency practitioner, and I don't take it personally. But hello, everyone. In terms of my top two tips for advising a business owner when facing a degree of financial distress, I put aside the fact that I have been involved in this profession for even longer than 30 years, but have been a licensed practitioner since 1990, as James says. Firstly, I relate to the person. I do not look to come across as a technical expert. That's subtly in the background. I have to establish a rapport and work to get on the same wavelength as the business owner or owners that I'm sitting in the room with, because for them, it's reached a possible new low. This is the result of a series of events, some controlled, some not, that have resulted in them in a very unwelcome and difficult personal financial scenario, sitting with someone they do not want to be in the same room with on a professional level, and waiting to hear the truth, the clouds sort of blown away, and having to face reality. That can be difficult financially and emotionally. So my first top tip that I always follow in these initial meetings when advising business owners is relate to the person. The second top tip is really then, once that's established for me, is to help the client detach from their emotions. Because if you think about how the effects of business distress can impact on individuals, it's very deep and significant. Business owners rely on their business in so many ways, and indeed it's part of the family. Often they see more of that than they do their family. So there is a strong emotional attachment to the business. What I feel that I need to do in these circumstances is help the business owner detach from their emotions and identify and relate to what I think they need to stipulate as their objectives. Where do you want to be as a result of this professional relationship? You're not here because you want to be. I'm here to help you. What do you want this dialogue to achieve? And so if they're able to detach in that way, they stand a much better chance of actually understanding where they are, possibly how they got there, and where they want to be at the end of it. It needs to have a strategic objective for the business owner. Otherwise, it potentially means that they are being buffeted by the winds of commercial misfortune, and who knows where they may end up. I'm hand-holding you, the business owner, to get from A, where you are, to B, where you want to be. That is essentially the format of our professional relationship. If I can help you get to your B, so you go off into the sunset and achieve what you want to with a fresh start, then from my professional perspective, I've achieved a positive result.
Lovely. Thank you, Frank. So the two golden nuggets from Frank: emotional detachment and strategic thinking about you're at point A, how do you get to point B? That's very helpful, Frank. Now, Richard. Now, I've known Richard, I was working out Richard for 28 years.
It's a long time, James.
Indeed. And whenever I introduce someone to Richard, I probably introduced 20, I reckon, and probably only 4 or 5 of them happily have gone into insolvency procedures. What I always say is, here's Richard Randall, he's a lovely guy. I hope you never need to meet him again beyond this meeting. So with that backdrop, Richard, what are your 2 golden nuggets?
Thank you, James, and good morning, everybody. I think the critical thing is to start right at the beginning of this. With any business, you need to know what it's all about. I think you need to understand your business and understand what's gone wrong. I regularly look at my business, and it never ceases to surprise me to know and understand what I thought I knew was the actual business is actually something different. I actually go through and cost my service lines and work out how much it costs me on a regular basis to actually see and understand how much things are actually taking, how much costing, and how much time my staff actually spend doing things that I take for granted. And it never ceases to surprise me. And you ask the simple questions like, why did you do that? And they'll tell you and think, oh, that is a real surprise. So I think one of my top tips is really take time out, and you've got a perfect time now to actually sit down, look at your business, think about it, and actually work out what's good and what's bad and the ugly bits. And then you've got the opportunity to work those through and come to solutions for yourself. All we do as insolvency practitioners, as Frank's pointed out, is merely guide you to a solution. We can give you a range of options. We can teach you some techniques, but you need to understand and run your business. It's your business. We're not experts in running engineering businesses, but we can actually teach you some techniques to look through the business, to identify what's not working well and what you need to fix. And no business is immune from problems, right? My other top tip is what I call Richard's rules of holes. The
rules of
one,
holes.
Rules of holes.
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 H-O-L-E.
Yes, when you're in a hole, stop digging, right? Second law is don't pull the sides down on top of you. And the third law is ask for help and advice to get out. We're not immune. Nobody's immune from problems. Every business has problems. It's how you handle those problems, how you deal with the opportunities that arise, and where you go from there. Frank's pointed out, we're there to guide you from A to B. We can't get you from A to B unless you help us and we help you. It's a two-way thing. There's no golden there's no golden bolt, there's no golden opportunity to do this. It's a case of a process over a period of time by which we can help you if you ask for the advice at the right time. The sooner you ask for the advice, the easier it is for us to help you, the less the problem is. So think about your business, and when you need advice, don't be afraid to go and ask for it. Those are my top tips.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. So Richard's 2 golden nuggets. Think deeply about your business and take expert advice. Lovely. Thank you, Richard. Now over to V now. Am I allowed to say, V, when you and I met first?
Of course you are, yes.
So I had
a
a bizarre first getting to know V when I met her at a Zoom meeting about 2 weeks ago. And we were organising this webinar, And we were having a Zoom meeting like this, and I was saying, I've got two other people who'll be on the panel. There's Richard Randall, a guy I've known 28 years, and this guy, Frank Wesley. And V immediately said, "Frank's my husband." And I said, "You're pulling my leg." And I literally didn't believe you. And V said, no, he is my husband. And then she said, "Oh, I'll go and get him." So she walked upstairs and brought Frank down, and he gave me away. Anyway, V, what are your... So you started your career in working within accountancy businesses, licensed insolvency practitioners, but your focus very much now is you're not a licensed insolvency practitioner. Your focus is helping directors and business owners. So what are your two golden nuggets for the people today?
I actually accidentally fell into insolvency. It wasn't sort of my life goal. I wanted to be a journalist, so desperately looking for a job when I moved from Leicester to London, and was offered a job by Moore Stevens for 9-month maternity contract. And I thought, oh, do you know what? It doesn't matter. Need the money, get the job. Let's start somewhere. And I never left. So I've been doing insolvency for 28 years. I qualified as a mediator because I didn't quite agree with quite a lot of the clients and directors that were coming to me and discussing the trials and turbulences that they would experience with insolvency practitioners. So I kind of became the go-between to help them lose that fear, lose that emotion, and step right in and have a plan. 90% of directors I see don't have an identified business, so they haven't got a USP, their unique selling point. So I always say to people, be disruptive, be concerned about what it is that you're actually going to sell. I was advising a director about 6 months ago. He was doing websites, doing CSR, doing branding. He had no clear functionality for what his business actually did. So, try and think outside the box, really spend some good quality time. Have a coach, have a business coach. Think about what your USP is. What are you going to sell to the market outside? And so what if you mess up? Start all over again. Tool up, get the training, get the resources, stand firm and be strong, and continue with the business.
Yeah.
We all fall down, we all fail. That's my first sort of tip, but have a very, very clear, concise USP. Know your product, know what you're selling. Secondly, it's a dog eat dog out there, so you're not only going to be the only webmaster out there. You're not going to be the only insolvency practitioner out there. You're not only going to be the only mediator out there. Be strong. You have a survival plan. Without a survival plan in something like what we're going through at the moment, the sensitive circumstances, not having a survival plan is failure in itself. My sort of 4 or 5 things I say to people are, get serious about your business, create a plan, get resources, tool up, get your mental fitness straight, take it in stages. Nobody says, you've got to do it tomorrow, and don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Right. Lovely. Okay. That was very helpful. So these 2 golden nuggets, really be clear on what it is you're really good at, your unique selling point, and make sure you've got a really good plan that you follow through on. 2 very good top tips. So now what we're going to do is divide those who are here this morning into 3 groups. And in those groups, there'll be about 7 or 8 of you in each group. What we would like you to do is to agree among yourselves what are the 2 burning issues for your group. What are the 2 things you think are really, really important for your own business or for clients you're working with? We'd like you then to choose a spokesman among your group, and then that spokesman will come back to this main group that'll be up on the stage here, and will ask the panel what their views are on those 2 burning issues. So we've had 6 golden nuggets. We're now going to have 6 burning issues through the breakout sessions we're going to create. So Nikki Holt is going to press the button. Now, as I was just rehearsing that line this morning, Nikki Holt, Bernie the Bolt. Does anyone remember Bernie the Bolt?
Regrettably, I'm old enough to do so, James.
So anyone who remembers Bernie the Bolt, can they please put their thumb up? We just see how old. Oh dear, not many, not many. So Bernie the Bolt was with Bob Monkhouse on The Golden Shot. So it's a golden theme today. So Nikki Holt is going to press the button, I hope. Nikki, are you there, Nikki? She disappeared.
She's on mute, James.
She's on mute. Give us a wave, Nikki.
Hello,
There?
I am still here. I'm just sorting people into rooms as we speak.
Are you? Right.
So please bear with me.
We need to have a break. So we've got to call on someone in the audience to entertain us. Who'd like to...
Perhaps people have got some comments about what's been said already.
Yes, good idea. So does anyone have any comments they'd like to make? Let me choose someone. Alan, would you like to, Alan Morgan, would you like to unmute and share with us a burning question?
Can you hear me, guys?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Why don't we see you as well, Alan? Put your video on.
Hang on. There we go.
Oh, you've come on the top. You've suddenly become top table, Alan.
Okay, something wrong there then. Can I ask Frank, Richard and V, a lot of clients that I'm talking to at the moment, they don't have a plan. They don't know what's going to happen because there are so many uncertainties. But should they be seeing you guys now, or is it going to just confuse them even more? And you know, it's too
right.
early. Do they?
That's
need
a very
to
good question,
come along
Alan. Yes.
When they've actually got their plan.
Yes. So Frank, Richard, and V, would you like to sort of take that in turn?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Frank.
There is nothing to fear for one of your clients coming to see any of us or another insolvency practitioner. We're here to help. Often I have this a comment up my sleeve that people think I've got 3 heads because my primary professional qualification is that of being an IP, but that's sort of put to one side. Very few of my clients come to see me from a strategic perspective, i.e. having the systems and foresight in place to be able to identify that 6 months or a year down the line, all things being equal, their business will have difficulties, and how should they prepare, and what are their options. That's quite rare, and I wish it would happen more often. Right. Unfortunately, what tends to be the normal scenario is that people are reactive, and they will come to see me when they're already staring in the headlights like rabbits, wondering which way to turn and what to do and who to ask for help.
So they're seeing you too late.
Often, that's right. That's right. Now, we have a professional mantra that come and see us early.
Yeah,
not a simple sales pitch. It's sound advice. Talk to us before it hits the fan. Sorry, Richard.
Alan, sorry, no problem. Sorry to interrupt. Most insolvency practitioners, most reputable insolvency practitioners will actually talk to your client for an hour or so, absolutely without cost and without obligation, to see what they can do to actually help if they can. We've got a couple of articles on the website about how to survive. They're very simple articles. There's business continuity, that sort of thing. I'll put those as part of the transcript so that you can actually show those to your clients if you want. But it's the thing to do is, if they think they need it, that is the time when they need to actually speak to one of us. We might actually say, kind of, you know, quite often with some of James's clients, I said, look, you can solve this easily yourself. What you need to do is this. You need to do this, that, and the other. But then you need to decide, you need to get your clients to decide to do something. Quite often, right, they're sat there, as Frank said, like rabbits in the headlights, when actually they actually need to move out of the ambush zone. Yeah, they need to actually move on, and they can actually solve it themselves with a little bit of confidence, with a little bit of help from you, maybe with a little bit of help from somebody else, or even a lawyer to solve things. You know, it's that's the sort of issues that they need to come as early as they can to actually understand it, to see whether, I mean, if we don't think we can help them, we will tell them.
Richard.
Many times I've
If they come
told
and it
people,
is
Lovely.
too early, then you'll say, look, it's a bit early, come back, you need to do this, this and this. And
Yeah.
have it clear in your mind, then come back. But don't come too late is the message that I'm getting
Yeah.
from both of you.
Yeah.
And V, did you want to
there's
add
always,
something?
sorry, James, go on. There's
Did you,
always,
I was just saying, did you want to add something?
yeah, that it's a case of pointing people in the right direction and not leaving it, and without sort of reiterating what Frank and Richard said. We're currently offering, and it's been on the website for about 6 months now, but we're offering sort of businesses, what we will point you in the right direction. It's a business survival kit. So if you, it's on the Navigate Business Recovery website. If you just click on the link, fill out your details. I think it's 2 hours that Amit, my nephew, he's set it all up. So it's 2 hours. So we've actually said in there that you don't have to give us your name. You don't have to give us your telephone number. You can do a Zoom, Skype, FaceTime. You can become an alias, because some people, like Frank was saying earlier, they're worried about, the amount of public information that's available. So if you Google me, you'll find how many companies I've got. So, people don't want to know, oh, I'm Richard Rendell, and they'll go into company's house. So come on, as an alias, tell me you're Joe Bloggs, and we'll still point you in the right direction. You don't have to give me any GDPR information at all. So, find the website, there's a business review there, and it will literally deal with the top 10 critical tips for businesses that are suffering as a result of what's going on at the moment.
Okay, that's really useful, guys. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you all. Now I'm just going to ask Nikki whether
Yeah.
Breakout is ready.
Breakout is ready. We've got a few people missing from our delegate.
Oh, I see.
So,
Right.
I'm actually trying to sort of sort through who's here and who isn't. What I've done is I've allocated you all to breakout rooms. I'll open them now. If for any reason I've got some people who are going to stay in breakout room 3, which is going to stay in the main session. So they will not be allocated to a breakout room, and I will just read out your names. And then if anybody is unallocated, let me know. So I'm opening the rooms now, and you will be directed to them.
Okay.
So strangely enough, Alex, I don't know if Alex is still there.
No, I think Alex sent me a
so
chat
Alex
message to say you had to go.
Fine. Okay. And Sarah Wilkes. Do we have Sarah Wilkes in the room? No? Okay. So that means then that Carl, Julia Branson. Do we have Julia Branson? We don't, do we? Okay. So
No.
Carl Tomlinson, Richard Casbolt, Chris Timpson, Ian Woolard, Rupert Pease, and Richard Casbolt.
Yeah.
You don't look as if you've been assigned a room. That's because you're staying in the main session.
Okay.
So are you all
So what
happy
I
with
would
that?
ask the panel to do is to put your lights out. So go and off and have a comfort break. So this is we'll be back in half an hour, Nikki. It's running slightly over time.
We are running over, I would say 20 minutes.
20 minutes, right.
Yeah.
So we're going to, at 11 o'clock, we're going to bring you all back to the main room. So as I said before, what you should be doing is deciding what are the 2 burning issues you'd like to discuss and put to the panel, and choose a spokesperson.
Right, so I've got, who's in this room with me? Ian?
Hi Carl, how you doing?
Richard, hello Richard.
Hi.
Can you all see each other?
Chris, who I know, hi Chris. There's 4 of us in this room at the moment, Nikki.
Okay,
right?
there should be Carl Tomlinson, Richard Casbolt, Chris Timpson, Ian Woolard, Rupert Pease. Yes, that's right, because I've got Richard Casbolt on my list twice. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there should be. Do you have Rupert?
Can't see Rupert, can we?
Rupert, I see, is muted. So Rupert, do you want to unmute?
Talk
I think
to us,
Rupert's having problems with his camera.
Okay, but even if you can unmute, that would be great.
Rupert, so there's a bottom left.
Let me see if I can do anything with his camera.
Oh, you might be able to. I think he's got a problem with his camera, but you might be able to. unmute him remotely. Looks like you are. And Steve Clark Steve, I see, is unmuted. Steve, can you say hello to us? Gone off to make a cup of tea, perhaps. I'm not sure which Steve Clark that is.
Still no sign of Rupert.
Rupert, I think, so Rupert is struggling, I think, with the technology. You can probably hear us, but struggling to put it on. So, so I would just start if I were you. So it's, so forget we're here. So it's the four of you now showing. Off you go.
Yeah.
Work out your two burning issues.
Hi, sorry, James, can you hear me?
I can.
Juliet, so I don't know, because I can see other names and I'm here as well, so I'm not sure whether there are other people in this room as well, because I can see other names and I can hear you.
Yes. Well, I assume Steve Clark is here, but Steve, he might have gone off to the loo or something, mightn't he? So I would just ignore the fact there's a few names around and just look at the people who've got their videos on and just have a chat.
Fantastic. Let's do that then.
Well,
Maybe it'd be a good idea if we all just said a couple of words about ourselves so we know what our sort of background is and where we're coming from to start with.
Sure. You go first.
You want to start, Chris?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Quite quiet, Chris.
Okay. I hope that's better. I worked at my family's company. We were an engineering firm that got into some difficulties with the other business partner. And that was resolved a couple of weeks ago. The other business partner bought us out, essentially. That's it, I guess.
Richard?
Portfolio FD, working with SME clients in the south primarily.
Okay. Ian?
Yeah, I run a small chartered accountancy practice, and we've got 120 incredibly concerned, worried clients at the moment. So yeah, I'm just trying to do what I can to help them as best I can at the moment.
And I'm a virtual FD. I work with a small number of SMEs, both on a technical accounting basis and providing coaching and mentoring support. I'm also a shareholder in a manufacturing business with interests in the UK and in the Czech Republic. So I'm seeing it both at first hand and at client hand at the moment. What are your clients talking about, Ian?
They're not really talking at all for some reason. They've all just seemed to have taken the opportunity to furlough everyone and just pull the ladder up, really. I think that's what I can see. Everybody has just kind of consigned themselves to 3 weeks off, plus however long it's going to be.
It's going to be longer than 3 weeks, Ian.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it. Other than the initial sort of barrage of issues around job retention scheme and self-employed scheme, and all of those kind of questions around that, everyone that I can see has just stopped.
Is that what you're seeing as well, Richard?
Other than my clients in the construction sector, yes. I've got a couple of clients in construction. One is packed up because they can't work safely. And the other one is able to continue. However, they are going to suffer very soon because their suppliers of materials and stuff are shutting down. So as soon as they run out of materials, they can't build anymore.
We've got a construction client who was being put under pressure by the developer. So he works for a private developer. The developer's telling him, "Get back to work. Why are you not at work? You can safely go to work. Get back to work." His wife, who's pregnant, is saying, "If you go to work, you're not coming in the house." Now he did phone me, and What do I say? I actually said to him, I think you should go to work and just see if your wife will let you in to have a shower and sleep in the car. That was my advice, because he can't annoy his funder, and his funder is saying it's going to cost me X amount of thousands of pounds for our site to be shut. What do you do?
My construction client is much bigger than that, and I've encouraged them to get hold of their lawyers to have a look at the contractual arrangements, to see what it says in terms of this. Effectively, it's something they can't control.
Right, so that's a good point, Richard. So I think definitely we should ask the sort of legal people that we've got on the call about frustration in contracts, and
yes,
when do you start the process of just telling somebody, look, we're frustrated under this contract for these reasons? I don't know, is that good enough to just say we're drawing your attention to this? What if you don't have frustration contracts? Well, I mean, I think
that's a good. I'm conscious we probably need to move around and pick up some other issues. And I mean, so I've made a note about frustration. That's an interesting, actual, practical, technical point. Chris, is there anything that you've sort of noticed and experienced? I know your association with your business has sort of come to an end now, but in the tail end of your association, what were you seeing as being issues arising, not so much from the relationship between the business partners, but from COVID-19?
To be honest, just the uncertainty of it all. You don't know if your customers are still open. You don't know if the suppliers are still open. You don't know how long they're going to be open for. How can you plan around that? That was a really big issue, I think. Because one day your customer could be open, and then the next day they're saying, "Oh, sorry, no, we've made a decision overnight." What do you do to that?
That came across very clearly, I think, when one of the panel mentioned the term, which I thought was quite an arresting term, ambush mode. And listening to you, Ian, your clients aren't talking to you. I wonder if they're doing much thinking.
So I've sent everybody a tool, a cash flow tool, and asked them to complete it, just really for their own sanity, just to try and look at what taxes are coming and which ones, how we deal with those. Only one person's come back with it, though. That's interesting, isn't it?
The situation with my clients is that you can plan for cash flow, but they don't know how long they can plan ahead. They don't know when income's going to start arriving again, because until you can work out what your income is, you've only got outgoings, haven't you?
Yeah.
The government's helping with deferred taxation payments and stuff like that, but actually you've still got people to pay. It's a problem.
Yes, but then you've got to decide who you're going to pay, haven't you?
Yes.
Who comes first? So my advice to all my clients, rightly or wrongly, is to speak to all of the suppliers and see what kind of personal negotiation that they can come up with as to payment plans.
Yeah.
And try where possible to keep the small businesses paying out cash to small businesses. And if everybody does that, we've got some chance.
So prioritize. So from that, I would draw two things. One is actually how long can you live on your reserves?
Yeah.
I think that's what you were saying there, Richard.
Yes.
And how can you make those reserves go further? I think that's your point, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, who should you be paying and who shouldn't you?
I'm wondering
my wife actually works for a company. She's still working from home. She's still working, but now from home. And she does a lot of debt chasing. And what she's getting is, we can't pay anybody. COVID-19 is the standard excuse that's coming out now. So she's getting very frustrated because it's the same conversation every time.
I had an interesting conversation with the credit controller at one of my clients about this. And
hi guys, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know 10 minutes left.
Thanks, Nikki.
Okay, bye.
And the conversation went along the lines of this, which was, we know who the people who mess us about month in, month out are. They're not going to mess us about anymore because of COVID-19. we know the people who pay us every month are. And if they're starting to ask us, they're the ones we should listen to, but we should still be doing everything we can to recover from the people who have a different excuse every month for not paying us. And I think one of the things
she's getting excuses from people who would normally pay okay.
One of the things that sort of floats to the top of all this for me is this, you know, how do you tell a basket case from someone whose business is genuinely being put under more pressure than it can cope with because of COVID-19? How well do you, as a business owner, really understand your clients and their underlying business strength? And that's maybe a little bit bolting the stable door after the horse has cleared a few fences. But it's in terms of thinking about doing some of the thinking that business owners need to be thinking about to come through this.
Yeah.
Really understanding, you know, you were saying, Ian, about supporting the small businesses, but also understanding who the clients are who maybe don't deliver a lot of margin and don't actually form part of their business going forward.
Yeah, certainly. That's kind of what V was saying about understanding your business, wasn't it? You know, you really need to take an opportunity to really get to grips with what the core of your business is. You need that USP. It needs to be fully understood. But that actually is much lower down the list than how much is in my bank account right now.
Sure.
So I've got a technical point I wouldn't mind raising. A lot of our clients are paid dividends instead of a kind of salary. So what sort of danger is there that we kind of clearly are switching and we're going from a 8 grand salary up to a 60 grand salary overnight? Is there any risk there that are we doing anything wrong? Are we going to be criticised for that action?
What, in order to so that they can furlough themselves?
No, just because the problem that I can see is you're going to get a lot of people who are going to suffer losses and can't pay themselves a dividend. So they're going to have to switch to a salary, and then ultimately then the business is going to fail. And then how does that look when a director has kind of whacked their salary up and the business is clearly struggling, but they've got to get their 3-4 grand a month out of the company?
That's probably a question for Wesley, for Frank, or one of the others, isn't it?
Yeah, that's yeah.
But in terms of switching from a dividend strategy to a sub strategy, that's probably quite beneficial right now, because 80% of it will get covered up to 2.5 grand, won't it?
Well, I think the wording in the job retention scheme refers to something called usual wages. So then the challenge is going to be, well, what's your usual wages? And there's a lot of guidance now for 0 hours contracts, which says we have to look back at an average. Yeah. So if you look back then at an average, it's not going to help you that much.
My understanding is that personal services companies are going to be, you know, people. I expect you run your business like this, Richard, and I do too. We're just going to be left on the hard shoulder on all of this. And
oh yeah, we get nothing. I'll get nothing out of this personally. Fortunately, I've got sufficient. What is it you called it? Resources, reserves for a little bit before I have to go to get my £94 a week from the revenue.
Yeah. Don't eat those fish, will you?
Not quite big enough, I'm afraid.
Sorry if that was a bit ghoulish.
That's fine.
Okay, so the two issues that seem to be most important here are frustration of contracts being frustrated, and also this issue about payments to directors. I guess if the quantum isn't increasing and the company's still technically solvent, that would be one thing. If the quantum were going up, however it was removed from the business, and the company were not solvent, whether it's a dividend or a salary is probably a moot point.
Yeah,
but
but you could in theory, you can pay yourself a salary and create an accounting loss. What you can't do is do that and then take the dividend. So
I understand that, yeah.
But can we?
But in doing that, aren't you neglecting your director's duties to maintain your business on a sound financial footing?
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, quite. Yeah.
Ian, I think you've sort of got these points quite clearly formulated. It might be good if you would put them to the panel.
Me?
If you're happy to do that.
So it's the issue about remuneration of directors and frustration in contract.
Yeah. You seem to have them in the fewest words.
Well, I've just been through this process before, and it's you are really expected to justify every decision you make. Quite rightly, I'm just wondering how it would look if there's a sudden and clear change in strategy.
Chris, do you want to jump in with anything before we head back into the main hall, as it were?
To be honest, I'm a bit out of my depth there. I didn't get involved so much in the business side, so I'm leaving you guys to it, sort of. And great questions, I have to say. The director's remuneration thing, that was an issue at the company I was at. Didn't seem to have a definite answer as well, is the thing. It's rather, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Agreed. Just out of interest, Carl, do you run as a sole trader or a limited company or
No, limited company. I'm part of James Shan's VFD network.
Okay.
And he requires us to be limited companies, and the advantages, I think, for me of being a limited company are a bit better.
Just curious how you do it. I do it as an LLP.
Right.
With some other guys involved in the same business.
Well, there's just me, so it makes sense to not bother with that approach, I guess.
Yeah, it depends on your view on Schedule D or Schedule E, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't really have one. They get it off you one way or the other in the end.
Sure. Richard, if you're an LLP, don't you qualify under the self-employment scheme?
Yeah, but if your declare profits for the last 3 years are over 50k a year, you get nothing.
Fair enough. Good answer.
Had a couple of good years, and unfortunately, the last year's not been so good, so I would qualify under that one, but that one doesn't bring the average down.
Right, yes. Fair enough, Richard.
So yes, unfortunately, I don't qualify for anything.
Yeah, it's not fair, is it? Really. And I don't get why self-employed people have to wait until June. Everyone else can get it in April. Any reason for that? Do you think
they're going to take it off the July instalment, aren't they? I suspect.
Yeah, but like just from a cash flow perspective, are they assuming that self-employed people have sort of cash reserves? Then is that the logic?
They must be. That's exactly their view, isn't it? Because it's an application process by June. It's not the money, because they're gonna contact all the self-employed people who they think are going to qualify, rather than you as a self-employed person applying. They're going to contact you.
Bit like the business rates thing. But then the business rates thing, you can apply without them contacting you first, because we've done it.
But there is currently no mechanism in place to do that. Whereas the rates thing is very straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's already a mechanism in place.
Yeah.
Guys, sorry to interrupt. I'm going to be asking you to rejoin the main session, or asking the breakout rooms to rejoin the main session. So just make sure you sorted out your spokesman and your two burning issues.
Yep.
So,
Yes,
okay,
thank you, Nikki.
Bye.
Thanks,
guys.
You then, Ian.
Cheers.
Thanks. Thank you.
Are we all back in the main room now?
Yep, looks like it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Now, we did say that we'd open the chat line. So if anyone's got any particular questions that haven't perhaps been covered in your breakout room sessions, do feel free to pop it on the group chat. And if there's time, we will deal with those questions at the end. So we just wait for everyone to come back in. Is everyone back in, Nikki, would you say?
Let's have a look. I think, yeah, they should all have automatically come back in. It
Right.
looks like, no, it looks like we're missing one room.
Ah,
Okay.
they're having too much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can check where they are.
Better knock on the door before you go in.
That's more difficult than you think. Okay.
So what I would suggest, whilst Nikki's just organising that room, could I ask that everyone other than the 3 spokespeople and the 3 panellists click off their video? Lovely, thank you all very much. So Mr. Ian Woolard, I believe, is the spokesman for room 1.
Yep.
Who's the spokesman for room 2?
Alan Morgan.
Alan, lovely. And Amanda, are you the spokesman for room 3?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Brilliant. Excellent. So, should we go from left to right? So left to right for me anyway. So, so we've had the golden nuggets. Now we're having the burning issues. So Ian, what were the 2 burning issues that your group hit upon?
So I think a lot of our clients run small limited companies and pay themselves a modest salary, sort of 700 and 800 pounds or whatever the figure is, 720 pounds, and then top that up with a dividend. The question I get asked a lot and recently is it time to switch to a salary? So I suppose the burning question is, if we advise or we're trying to help advise our clients, and they kind of all of a sudden go to putting themselves on a £60,000 salary, the result might be in 3 months' time, say the company gets into serious difficulty and can't pay, the then result in PAYE on that. How does our director, how does that sit in the eyes of sort of the law?
Right.
And what have we done wrong, if anything?
Right, so let's get your second one first, and then we'll ask Frank first, then Richard,
Okay.
then V to respond.
So the second question, James, yeah?
Yeah, the second one
Okay,
as well.
second question.
Yeah.
Actually, as a firm, we've just taken on a new lease. And I think, James, you mentioned to me the concept of frustration in contracts. I was just wondering how that actually looks. So we've got a lot of construction clients that are very, very worried they're going to get hit with penalties in terms of kind of not fulfilling their obligations. And
right.
What would you advise that we sort of say to our clients about that?
Lovely. So Ian's 2 questions are, first of all, remuneration strategy, as I'd call it, dividends versus PAYE salary, and secondly, what's the insolvency practitioner's view on frustration? And I know there's a couple of lawyers here today, so it might be that Nikki Anderson would like to chime in on the legal point on frustration. But Frank, over to you.
Okay, let's deal first, hi Ian, with the point that you asked in relation to switching from dividend model to salary model, and underneath all of that is if that results in the business incurring a loss-making trend, ending up in a worse position. How is the IP going to view that when your client comes to seek advice? One assumes that when that switch is made, that the client has sat down and sketched out what they believe the consequences of that switch is likely to be. Obviously, none of us have crystal balls, or at least crystal balls that work. So the best educated estimate of what that switch is likely to result in Now, clearly that's going to mean additional costs for the business. So unless that can be funded in some other ways, the client is going to have to make some adjustments to the way that their business operates in a commercial sense, so as to avoid that loss-making trend coming into effect. But let's paint a very brief picture for this. You have a client, this is what they've done. 3 or 6 months down the line, you've been kind enough to contact me and say, I'd like you to sit down with X and discuss their business's financial position. They switched from a dividend model to a salary model. This is what's happened since. It didn't quite turn out as they had planned and expected. Is there anything to worry about? Well, firstly, was that done with the best of intentions and sincerity? Would any average director have possibly taken the same steps? Bearing in mind at the moment that the remedy available to IPs of wrongful trading has been suspended for the time being, with effect from 1st of March. So directors do not necessarily need to specifically concern themselves with that aspect. Clearly, if they switched to a different model of drawing funds out the company and paid no other regard to the way that the business was operating financially, I wouldn't necessarily call that as responsible. But if they're doing their best, they're making appropriate adjustments in other financial respects to accommodate this change, but it doesn't work out, I don't regard that, based on this chat, there's a legal disclaimer for you, I don't regard that, based on this chat, as necessarily causing a great deal of concern for me or for them, providing that all that I've outlined can be evidenced.
Lovely. Frank, that's very helpful. Now, what about frustration? Or is that one for the lawyers, do you think?
It probably is. Ian, could you just sort of summarise that point again, please?
What, frustration?
If you don't mind.
So I would say I actually came at it from my own perspective, because I just signed a lease, and I just wondered how it would actually work legally if I couldn't actually, if I'm restricted to using that property through no fault of my own or theirs. But actually, the more I think about it, it's more to do with the construction clients we've got who are going to get heavily penalised for delays in building and completion.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just set in, I don't know whether Nikki would like to unmute and join me.
Yes,
in this discussion.
certainly,
Nikki,
yes.
You wanted it? No, Nikki Anderson.
Oh, sorry.
Wrong
I'll go
Nikki.
away again. I'm going away.
Nikki, are you there, or are you? Oh, Nikki.
Trying, yeah.
Oh, hello. So, what was that? What that game used? The chat show. Anyway, forget it. So, Nikki will remember when she was at College of Law, which was more recent than myself. But we always get really excited about frustration versus force majeure. So, Nikki.
Yeah, definitely. I think force majeure is probably potentially the first port of call, because that may suspend performance of the contracts depending on the wording, which leaves the parties in a much sort of clearer position in terms of what the obligations and rights are, whereas frustration would effectively, rather than just being something that's unforeseeable, would be something that sort of goes to the heart of the contract, and the performance is actually impossible. So the particular circumstances as to whether they're just sort of unforeseeable and a disruption, or actually go to the heart of sort of impossibility of performance, need to be looked at, and then there could still be sort of remedies available to the parties under that. So force majeure, I think, is probably the starting point, and if there's a clause in the contract that covers that, to see how it would work, because suspension of performance might be beneficial to both parties ultimately, particularly if you're a supplier. So you can just sort of say, actually, we're just pausing performance for now, and we'll pick it up again when we can.
Yes, there were a whole series of cases actually during the Second World War, and they introduced a new Act of Parliament because it was such a problem with the same sort of difficulties we've got now. And I had a very interesting conversation yesterday with two employment lawyers and one HR advisor over whether you could actually argue that an employment contract had been frustrated, which would then mean you didn't have to pay redundancy or unfair dismissal. Now, it was felt that that would be a difficult argument to run, but it might be one that someone wants to try to run. Anyway, thank you, Nikki. Now, I'm just going to move over to Richard now. So, Richard, the two questions were remuneration versus dividend policy, and any thoughts on frustration?
Well, dealing specifically with dividend policy at the moment, or remuneration policy, I think it is really difficult. But I think as an insolvency practitioner, I have to say that really you ought to switch away from dividends. You ought to go on to salary, or ought to advise people to go on to salary, even if that does create some additional costs. As Frank's mentioned, the wrongful trading provisions have been suspended for 3 months, and there's provision for it to be extended for longer. I think the devil is in the detail there, because there's a whole host of other issues arising, not just wrongful trading in relation to the Insolvency Act provisions. Why I suggest you switch from dividend to salary is, as an insolvency practitioner, any dividends declared and paid within 2 years of insolvency are basically a simple request to those persons who receive the dividends to repay them, unless they can prove that the company was otherwise insolvent. And that is really difficult test for them. So on that basis, I'd certainly say switch to salary, do what you can. There are obviously protections in there if you think about it, because even if you make losses during the wrongful trading period, as long as you document and work out and explain rationally, right, now why you're doing that, there is at least some justification for doing it. Taking dividends, there's really not a lot of justification, because all that is doing is you're saying that you're trying to manage your own tax affairs, right, to the detriment of creditors if things go wrong. So I would strongly advise going to a salary rather than a dividend remuneration basis.
Lovely, thank you, Richard. And the second
sorry, can I just come, sorry, James. There's also, you also got to realise as well, the traditional route of people just taking loans from the company, which is effectively what the argument becomes when they say we haven't got enough profits. Well, I took it as a loan. You then get the overdrawn director's loan account issue. Again, there's another couple of articles we've got on the website. Have a look at those. They are really on this point of directors' loans, wrongful trading, and dividend policy. So have a look at that.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. And the second point, frustration, have you got an IP view on it?
Yes, I have actually. I think you'll find, if you look very closely at some of the information that's come around, certainly to insolvency practitioners, I mean, we've had a tsunami of new regulations and suggestions of relaxations coming. There is actually some chat in relation to those about frustration of contracts and extensions and penalty clauses, etc. There is, the government is awake to it. The government is alive to the problem, and I think there's going to be a degree of sympathy. So, Ian, I think you've got some basis for being able to make some valid arguments there, and I think you're going to be supported by the government on that.
On remuneration, you're talking about, or frustration?
Frustration.
Yeah, I fear frustration has nothing to do with the government. An act was passed in 1943 that covers it. Effectively, what it says is, if it was unforeseen, it's an end, unless there's a force majeure clause.
They're actually talking about specific issues in relation to leases on that issue.
Oh, right, leases, right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, lovely, thank you. Now, V seems to have disappeared. So, and so is Frank as well.
They might have a power cut.
They might have a power cut. Indeed. So I tell you what we're going to do. I think we'll ask Amanda now. So you were the spokesman for. So Nikki, just to say, Frank and V have disappeared.
Yes, I'm looking for them at the moment, but it may well be that they've dropped off the internet. What I'd like to suggest, James, while we've got this little pause and before we go to Amanda, because we have such a relatively small number of people, what we can do is once we've finished our 2 golden nuggets and discussed that, rather than opening chat, I think it would be manageable to open the floor to everyone for questions.
Good idea.
But obviously, if they can raise their hands or do a wave, and then you can select who to speak. But if they can then turn on their microphones and their videos.
Yeah. So Amanda, I think if we could ask you what your 2 burning issues were, and we'll put it first. Well, we'll have to just put it to Mr. Rendell, as the sole man in the house.
Great, thank you. So we had a range of different types of businesses in our group, and in summary, essentially, the kind of 2 focus areas. One was around, we talked a bit about the kind of timescales. So there are things that people are doing, you know, because in the immediate because of lockdown, such as particularly around cash flow issues, and there was an example of having applied for the loan and how easy or not that was. So the question there, you know, what are the right things to be advising your own clients at this point in time, as well as thinking, you know, for your own business about bringing cash flow issues to manage those sort of cash flow issues for funding. But actually, that kind of leads you into then the do you think around that on a 6-month time scale or a 12-month time scale, or you know where does that take you? Something that you're doing right now to fix an immediate challenge. How can you sort of look ahead to the 6-12 month view to know that you're not doing something that's going to really hurt you in the longer term? So not an easy question, but essentially all around, you know, how to mitigate kind of a risk for longer term, given some instantaneous things that need to happen right now to protect business and your clients' businesses as well.
So just to be clear, Amanda, the question is, how far forward should you be looking on your cash flow?
That's one element of it. It's kind of, you know, decisions being made in the immediate to fix problems right now. You know, what will that mean in 6-12 months time, and back to the crystal ball piece, but are there things, you know, good practice or whatever that people could be thinking about for the longer term? Yes, based on decisions that, oh, sorry, I keep flicking. I don't know why it keeps dropping that way. There you go. Right. So that's kind of on the timescales issue, the challenge of, you know, fixing now, but also looking ahead. And the second kind of hotspot was actually then looking, if we do kind of step into the future and following what's been going on today, there was discussion around how to manage new spending patterns, etc., or the new market that we will be faced when things kind of somehow, I don't want to say return to normal, but come down to a more normal type of pattern. So, you know, we talked about things like personal working patterns will probably change in the longer term. You know, not so many people will just automatically assume they always have to go into a building to work and come back. But also, are people, they're spending up differently right now to cope with the situation at the moment, particularly under lockdown. But how to think about, well, those spending patterns, will they remain changed like that in the future, or actually will they change again but not revert to what they were before? So think about how companies can think around what, you know, what do they need to be thinking about, what do they need to be investing in for those potential spending patterns in the future.
Lovely, thanks, Amanda. Now, Richard, as V and Frank have returned, did you have problems with your internet?
The Wi-Fi just crashed.
Right. So I hope you. So I'd suggest we go to V first, if that's all right, Richard and Frank.
No problem.
So Amanda had 2 questions. First of all, about.
I think I missed the first part of that.
Right. So the first thing was about short-term versus long-term cash flow planning. And the second one was whether the new cost-conscious environment, as we all go forward, will mean that spending habits and what we all look to buy and spend our money on are going to be radically different, which I think is a very, very good point and worrying.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think isn't this the time then to start preparing cash flows? Amanda, I don't know what type of businesses you work with and what type of clients you work with, but isn't this the time to prepare cash flow forecasts, budgets, and implement a survival plan for the next 6 to 12 months? Do your clients have a projection going forward for 6 to 12 months or not at all?
Yeah, and the so the discussion in the group was also what is the best timescale, you know, sort of 6, 12, 18, those kinds of questions around as well came out.
Absolutely. So to deal with one point, if there isn't one, if there isn't a cash flow projection forecast, I would definitely put one in place for the next 18 months to 2 years. Ideally, you ought to have a survival plan for 3 years in terms of where your cash is being spent from a business perspective. On your second point, you know, your personal working practices, I'm not sure about your personal, like for me, I've been saving quite a lot of money already. I was saying to James in another webinar with him that I'm saving about £1,000 a month at the moment on my traveling into London, client meeting, coffees, lunches. There must be ways in which clients, any business owner, any director can really drill into his business and look at where the cost-cutting exercises are, because I don't for 1 minute believe, oh no, it can't be done, it can't be done. There must be ways.
I think if I understood Amanda correctly, it was more the worry that you as a supplier to consumers are going to find their spending habits are now radically different. So that because you're not going to London, spending money on nice lunches and coffees,
yeah,
companies are going to struggle.
Yes, so
I mean it's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Very much so. But isn't then, in retrospect, if you look at that from another point of view, that isn't then that particular client doing those similar things as well, which is saving him or her money as well?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
yeah.
a lot of people, I think it's very much about, I've probably had 20 phone calls in the last 3 weeks, and it's a case of I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. You know, look at the money is the first thing you need to look at. Really drill down on your monthly expenses and prepare that cash flow. Yeah,
lovely. Thanks, V. Frank, would you like to respond to those two
James.
questions?
Hi, Amanda. My take on the important and interesting points that you've raised, spending patterns, let's kick off with that one. Then for me, what I would be looking at is communicating with my top dozen customers and seeing how things are for them and what changes they anticipate to their businesses during this crisis and afterwards. Because clearly what they're going to be doing is asking themselves exactly the same questions. We're all connected. There's obviously a big domino effect. The current crisis has only exemplified that. So I would want to understand what my top 12 customers are likely to be doing in respect of their own spending habits and routines, so that I can then plan accordingly in my business and adjust if necessary. And obviously it's a dynamic scenario. It's not cast in stone. It's going to change for me as it changes for my customers in their own businesses. So understanding their needs and requirements will help me make the appropriate preparations in my business. And moving on to the other point that you raised, fixing now and looking ahead, one really needs dual vision, I think, in respect of having a cash flow for 12 months as an absolute basic minimum, but also looking either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis going forward during that time, and obviously updating it with actuals and seeing how it performs compared to budget, making necessary adjustments as things turn out. I've never yet seen a cash flow that actually does turn out to be 100% correct in the way that things transpire, but they're best educated estimates, and that's how I would do. Look short term and look strategically at 12 months as well at the same time.
Lovely, thank you, Frank. Richard, did you have some observations to add?
I do indeed. I think I think there's a simple answer, Amanda. You've got to survive in the short term. If you don't survive in the short term, you can forget about the long term. So concentrate on the short term, right? Do your forecasts, as everybody's said, all the presenters have said. You need monthly forecasts to start off with for the first 12 months. Then perhaps something like quarterly for the next year, and something in the third year, possibly an annual budget, so you know and understand what you're likely to do. But you need to concentrate first of all on surviving. There's going to be a lot of businesses, unfortunately, which are not going to survive, and the winners are going to be the ones that do manage to hang on. So you need to hang on in the short term. You need to make sure that you're around to be able to be one of the winners for the future. Because if you're not, then you're not there. You've got to be at the party to enjoy it. So the situation, and in terms of kind of how do you cope with the unknown, you don't. You do techniques. What you do, nobody knows what's going to happen. Well, I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen. But what you need to do, I think, is look at your business, understand it, and plan. And where you need to resize, don't be afraid to do so. We call it resizing insolvency, which is the polite term for kind of making sure you got the right number of staff doing the right job at the right time. Yeah. If you at least think about that, then at least you've got some way of justifying to yourself, as it were, that you made some of the right decisions. What you shouldn't do, or what business owners shouldn't do, is do nothing. They need to take positive steps, looking at their business, deciding what they can do, what they can't do profitably, and take it from there. Nobody's going to criticize them if they make mistakes down the road, as long as they've done their best to make take the right choices. And that's what the government is saying. They're trying to support business going forward, and they will do their level best. And I think insolvency practitioners, as pragmatic people dealing with these problems on a daily basis, that's what we
Lovely.
would say.
Thank you, Richard. That was very useful. So, Amanda, thank you for those questions. So, last but not least, Alan Morgan. Alan, you a spokesman for your room?
Yeah, for Alistair and Gail. I'm not sure if Gail's still around. She had a bad internet connection anyway, so it might be, maybe she's given up on that. So the two issues that we came out with, two burning issues, is that the number one that that we see at the moment is just the amount of uncertainty out there, that people just do not know what the immediate future is. Interesting what Richard just said there in terms of concentrating on survival first, because I think I very much agree with that people have got to concentrate on that first. They don't always know what their business is going to look like when we come out of the other side, whatever the other side is. And so it's all this uncertainty out there. So that to me is a burning issue. Some people that I deal with, some have started to think what it will look like the other side. So to give you an example there, a client that owns a number of hairdressing salons has already started thinking, when I get out the other side of this, my business is not going to be what it was. Certainly, just on the other side, but possibly for quite a time, that he'll have to distance the chairs in the salon, perhaps work and offer longer hours. So therefore, what's then going to happen to his income with that? Another client, in terms of uncertainty, works in the eventing industry. What is that industry going to look like beyond all this? The events are predominantly seasonal, so all of this year has more or less gone. He's got some coming up in the autumn, but are they going to happen? And are you going to get events like the NEC, for instance, where there's lots of people all together? I can't see that, and he can't see that happening anytime soon, if indeed will that happen at all. So burning issue number one, uncertainty, and number two was, where do you think the positivity in terms of going forward is going to come from? Is it down to where are we looking for the positivity from? Is it from business owners? entrepreneurs? Is it the government? Is it professionals? Yeah, we don't. That's something that we see as a burning issue. And I'd be interested
Right.
to get people's comments as to where.
Lovely. So should we start with V on that? So V, uncertainty and how you cope with it. And
Sorry, V.
Where'd you get your positivity from?
Oh, you know, I kind of even in no, and I kind of wake up every day and take, you know, every day as it comes at the moment. I've had some turbulence in my life over the last 4 weeks to add to the uncertainty. But I think there's so much negativity in the world as it is already. We're such moaners. We moan about everything, don't we? You know, as a nation. You know, what was it? Somebody said to me on Twitter yesterday, you know, being positive is being positive in a negative situation is not naive, it's being a leader, you know. So we're all in the same boat, I would say, and little steps every day make smaller transitions rather than, you know, I quite agree with you. I'm actually advising a company on event management at the moment, and they've changed their whole business model to online networking and nothing else.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about you, but I'm also thinking about and advising businesses on thinking outside the box, be a little bit disruptive. You know, think about things that you might be able to work from home, which is an added bonus that saves money. So I think we're all in the same boat. You know, what would I say is the answer to the uncertainty? I have no idea. I really have no idea as to where this is going to go. Are we going to be in another lockdown for a couple of weeks? Is it going to last for a month? The financial implications of that are going to last for a very, very long time. So I'm not sure really what else I can add to that, James.
No.
And I think with the uncertainty, I think when we come out of this first lockdown, I think that will put some positivity. That's my feeling, because people say, okay, we can go in, but we are going to come out, even if we do go back in again, which is of course a possibility. But at least they can see, okay, well, this might be what's going to happen and how I've got to think about my business.
Yeah.
Yes.
But do you really think that 90% of the businesses are going to ever be the same as they were before COVID-19?
No, not a chance.
Exactly. So, you know, it's
and they've got to start thinking at some stage about what their business is going to look like. But at the moment, it's very difficult to get. Some of them are, to be fair, but a lot of them just cannot see it. And it's one of my challenges is to get people to start thinking of, well, what's it going to look like?
Yes. How can you change your business model to survive a disaster recovery plan? Have a disaster recovery plan.
Absolutely.
You know, and then work towards that.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, V. Frank, did you have some observations on uncertainty and some positivity, please?
Yeah, certainly. So picking up on this then, to me, you mentioned a couple of client scenarios in the hairdressing salon industry and events, and like V, I'm also advising a couple of clients in the events business, and they're having to completely change their business model to adjust. And as everyone says and knows, no one knows what I call the new normal is going to be looking like, and it will take time to all slot into place. But to flip the scenario in relation to the hairdressing salon, isn't it a big opportunity to be positive and to get the message out to their customer base and the locality that your client has recognized that things will be different, people will have new concerns, to get the message out there in a positive fashion? We are distancing our chairs to ensure your health and safety. We are opening longer hours to accommodate your hairdressing requirements. Come and see us. We are in the new normal. That to me would be a positive spin on that side of things. So depends how you perceive a situation. One can either look at it as a problem or an opportunity. And because of this enormous what my corporate finance colleagues call market dislocation, creates massive opportunities to be positive. I think positive entrepreneurs and business owners will be in a minority, possibly even less of a smaller minority than they were before the crisis. So that, to me, is a great opportunity to go out there and get your message to address that. In terms of uncertainty, as V correctly says, no one knows how the business community and businesses themselves are going to emerge from this crisis, or how long it's going to last. All one can do in that sense is take the most immediate steps to protect the business, to ensure that they have the best opportunity to thrive and survive when the crisis does end. You know, protect revenue generating capacities within the business, preserve cash, give external stakeholders visibility on what's happening at the moment. No, people don't like bad news, but nasty surprises are even worse. So I think keeping external stakeholders updated as to what's happening within a business at this current time is potentially quite important. So managing uncertainty and constant communication and dialogue, I think, is key. Thanks, James.
Right, Richard, last comments on that, and then we'll throw the discussion open. In fact, why doesn't everyone put their videos on now and unmute so we can all see one another? If it gets noisy, we might ask you to mute it, but let's see your smiling faces. So, Richard.
Thank you, James. As insolvency practitioners, we deal with uncertainty every working day. There is nothing that's certain in our game. There's nothing that's certain when we are asked to deal with the business, particularly trading businesses. I've got a great deal of sympathy with your clients, but there's techniques for it. What you do is you start talking to people, you start asking them questions. You ask your customers, for example, in your hairdresser's business, for example, ask your customers, are they going to return? How often do what is going to be their spending pattern in the future? Talk to your staff. Are they going to want to work the longer hours? I suspect they might, because they're going to need the monies just like everybody else. I mean, at the end of the day, it is actually a very good business, a hairdresser's business in a downturn like this, because everybody has to have their haircut. Okay.
No, they don't, Richard.
I was going to say, apart from a couple of people, I'm not talking about Alan or James, okay? But most of us are lucky enough to be able to need to have our haircut, right? So, okay, people might say, I'll leave it a couple of weeks longer, but they're still going to come back and make that purchase. With the events business, that is something that's going to be slightly different, I think. I think those sort of businesses are going to have to, for want of a better expression, run for formal protection under the Insolvency Act. They're going to have to go into something like a company voluntary arrangement or something like that, because I think it's going to take a long time for that sort of business to come back. But again,
the one thing, sorry, Richard, I didn't say there in terms of that that particular client in the event industry is that he's in the agricultural sector, and he said to me yesterday, he said, Alan, he said, you know, thank goodness I'm in that sector because it could be a lot worse. So, and again, there the positivity was coming from him. So, but that's generally not what I'm seeing. That you know, people are negative, but you know, he's positive and he's thinking, well, it could actually be worse. So, yeah.
I mean, the positive on all this is stress. You've got to survive, right? If you survive, you have the potential to be there for the long term. If you don't survive, clients aren't going to be there for the long term. And however they survive is however they do it. And they've got to make decisions. They've got to look at their business, decide whether they need to mothball parts, resize parts, or even in the short term, just simply shut it down for 3 months and tell people that. Tell them why you're doing it. What's the alternative? The alternative is you won't survive. They won't survive. Tell them about it. Explain it to them in real terms. Give them a series of options. Say,
right,
you're not going to survive unless we do this. Okay, I can understand that. The figures show that. Let's work out the survival.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. So what I'm going to do now is, I think, just ask from the floor, who's got one burning question, and then we're going to wrap it up. So Ian was the man with his hand up and his finger up. Ian, what's your question?
Can I just ask Richard, you mentioned about this 2-year thing on dividends.
Yeah.
So if a shareholder director can evidence the correct paperwork within that 2-year window, can you get the dividend back?
Like everything, nothing is black and white where you're dealing with legal proceedings like that. But I think it's fair to say over the next couple of years, insolvency practitioners are going to have to look very hard and very carefully at the defences that directors bring forward in relation to a dividend policy. I would strongly urge clients to switch to remuneration policy to avoid the problem, because it is a problem if they can.
Fair point.
However, if somebody comes to me with a justification, I'm not going to look at the black and white of the law, because the law says recover the dividend, Richard. I'm going to look at the circumstances. I'm going to turn around, if necessary, to creditors and say, guys, this is what the situation is. This is what my take on it is. This is what I suggest we do. He's made a reasonable offer in terms of what would be restitution. Shall we accept that? We're pragmatic. Insolvency practitioners have to be pragmatic. There's very rarely black and white in our game. There's very rarely black and white in business, right? If it is, go for the white every time. But I can't, you can't prejudge a situation like that. It's all a touchy-feely thing.
Right, Richard, I'm gonna cut things off now and close up. But what I would like to say is we've got the room for another 20 minutes, half an hour. So if anyone wants to stay on and ask specific questions of V, Frank or Richard, I'm sure they will stay on. So let me go back to my screen share and we'll close. Ooh, where's it gone? Where's it gone? There we are.
Oh, James, I could see then that you didn't need a haircut.
You could. Did you spot that I needed some moisturiser? Actually, I've been applying the moisturiser since my...
Well, once I got over the fright, James.
Stop it, Richard.
Oh, right. Now what I'm doing is it's
I
down
have to
here
own
already.
up to having cut my own hair.
Right.
In desperation. So I'm going to be well, it is desperate. It's going to go pink next week as well, just to warn you all.
Our 22-year-old offered Frank a haircut a couple of days ago and said, Dad, I'll cut your hair. And Frank says, not until the IoD seminar, please.
Right. So can everyone see the screen saying future IoD webinars?
Yes.
Everyone see that? So next Wednesday, so we're having these, we're having these every week. The next one is on a really important topic, furlough agreements and grants. And really part of that is going to be about maintaining emotional engagement, connection with your team. I spoke to a very good client of mine yesterday, and he's well ahead of the game, and he's thinking about this, the fact that people are alone and isolated, and he's having very regular natters, as he calls them. So just where everyone gets together on Teams, he asks them, how's the home decorating going? How's the dog walking going? So just practical tips to keep the spirits up. So that's next Wednesday, the 15th of April. And then Wednesday, the 22nd of April, we have Ian Woolard, Carl Tomlinson has been with us today, and a lady called Amanda Webb, who's the chair of Buckinghamshire, who's going to be talking about forecasting and cash management in this stricken world. So I'm sure that's going to be very good and useful. So do come along to that. Now, I promised some words about Sir John Lubbock. So he was the founder of the Institute of Directors in 1903. It was the second institute he'd formed. In 1878, he founded the Institute of Bankers. Now, there aren't any bankers on here today, but sometimes we boo and hiss the bankers, don't we? Now, John Lubbock had run the family business started by his father. So In 1903, if one tries to look back, we'd had an industrial revolution, consumer society formed, and we got lots of rogues and scoundrels running companies. The case law is full of false prospectus law. So Sir John, who became the first Lord Avebury, he was a philanthropist, a member of Parliament, an educator. He put lots of bills through the Houses of Parliament. He was obviously a very ethical man. His childhood friend was Charles Darwin. This was a really interesting guy, a real thinker. And he formed the Institute of Directors, and 3 years later, he got its Royal Charter. And integrity and enterprise were the things that he thought were really important. So as we go forward, this question of trust, Ian Woolard and I were talking about this, customers, suppliers, how are they going to trust you? So your behavior now, how you respond to this crisis is going to absolutely determine whether they think you're a person they want to deal with. So we're in a really difficult position. So I want to share this slide with you. Now, we've talked about the golden nuggets. We've talked about the golden shot. Now, for anyone who comes from Birmingham, these are the golden boys. Hands up if you know who the golden boys are. So these guys started the Industrial Revolution. So James Watt, inventor of the condensing chamber to the steam engine. Matthew Boulton, a brilliant entrepreneur and salesman. Now, the only reason they were able to get the new improved steam engine into the market in Cornwall was because of the third man, William Murdoch, a really good project manager. So when my mother used to take me to see the statue when I was a young boy, and I never understood it. When I got to a bit older as a lawyer, lost all my hair, I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, this is the essence of growing world-beating businesses. Great technicians, really good entrepreneurs, and really good managers. So they are out there. We've got to find them. We've got to help them. We've got to support them. We've got to help these businesses turn around and grow. And then we'll look back in 20, 30 years' time, if we're still around, and we'll say, wow, what great things we did. And I hope you'll support the Institute of Directors, and thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, James.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Just to let everyone know, I will post those links to the future webinars on the group chat. It looks like Alistair has got his hand raised.
Alistair, you're muted. Do you unmute yourself?
I was just saying thank you.
Lovely.
Enjoyed it.
Now, there's a little reaction button for the future. Does everyone, if they would like to clap, feel free to clap. I'm clapping myself there. I'm putting the thumbs up there. Do feel free to do the same. Thank you all very much for coming. And if you'd like to stay on, would anyone like to stay on and have a chat with...
I just wanted to talk to Ian if he's still there.
Right.
Ian?
Yeah. So you'll stay on. Does anyone else want to stay on? Are you all going to say, love you and leave you?
I'm happy to stay on.
Thank you.
Right. Lovely. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Nikki.
You're welcome. I'm just going to stay anyway.
Oh, good. I'm
just posting stuff in the chat box so that everybody's got those links to the 2 future events. Do go and register. The places will be limited, so make sure you nab your space now.
Yeah,
Just wanted to say hello to Alistair. Glad you're looking safe and well, and looking forward to our next virtual coffee.
Look forward to it, Frank.
I was just going to ask whether Frank and I, our Wi-Fi crashed out, but I don't know, Ian, whether your director's dividend question was finished off properly or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think my view would be that overall, what we're going to do is just swap. Ultimately, all of our directors want to take 3.5, 4, 5.
Yes.
Ultimately, all they're going to do is just take out a similar amount of money, but just in a different way. And I guess it comes back to, well, what would be I suppose if they just simply did that, then I guess there'd be not too much to worry about, I guess.
Yeah, so I didn't really hear any of the answers, whether Richard gave an answer or Frank, but what I was going to say just on the back of your question was, whatever you do, document it. I think Frank or Richard, one of them mentioned, you know, you can go and change your dividends to salaries and change it into remuneration, but, you know, have a little piece of paper, 2 paragraphs that say, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Mr. and Mrs. Patel met on such and such a date as a result of what's happening, the coronavirus, the cash flow is, give yourself a handful of mitigating circumstances as to why you're putting into practice the remuneration package, because if you don't, the company will collapse. And have your, you know, give yourself some, record it, list it, and, you know, in these trying circumstances, maybe have directors meetings every week. 2 paragraphs, you know.
Yeah, go back to this good old standard directors board minute.
Yeah.
Have a minute explaining why you did it, explaining the swap to salary package rather than dividend, because of the uncertainty regarding the business, uncertainty regarding the circumstances. Just get the words, keep getting the word uncertainty in there, and just explain it so that any logical person can actually turn around. Because at the end of the day, it's not the insolvency practitioner's decision, it's the court's decision. But first of all, you've got to get the insolvency practitioner on your side. And if he can see that you've been reasonable and sensible, he's far less likely to say, well, let's let the courts decide, because his first course of action really, in those sort of circumstances, if he knows what he's doing, is to actually go and actually ask the creditors what they think.
Yeah.
And can I pick up on what Richard and
hang a second. If your clients have got that relationship where they've been talking to their suppliers and their customers, right, their suppliers will support them as well.
Yeah, I agree. In my experience, it's about time we got rid of this whole nonsense around, in my view, dividends and salaries anyway, because it is a bit of a mockery, and it causes so many problems. I would welcome that sweeping changes are made, which I think they are coming in August, from a taxation policy.
Yes.
I mean, it's already been muted on some of our systems that we see. It's definitely coming, I would say, and I think that's just going to make it a lot easier for us.
Yeah. But also,
the point that I just wanted to pick up, following the very valid comments that B and Richard have been making, is that the slight risk for the accountants in the room, so to speak, or the financial advisors is, well, not all insolvency practitioners deal with providing advice to clients in the same way that Richard and I do. So it's perfectly possible that the client might end up with a much more hostile insolvency practitioner. And the last scenario that you would want as the accountant to the client, once the IP has the focus on potential illegal dividends, is coming back to you and saying, well, why didn't you advise me to change the drawings model? Then we wouldn't have this problem. So for me, you've highlighted a very interesting point, A, for the client, but B, for the accountant as well. And to mitigate that risk, I think the right thing is to look at what clients are doing in that respect and to make them aware. So they may or may not follow your advice, but at least you've highlighted it.
Exactly. I've already been criticised because 2 years ago, I recommended a business incorporate for various reasons.
Yes.
It was their decision. I'm here to just explain things and guide people, I guess. I've been criticised because now they can't benefit from the COVID grants. Brilliant. Thanks.
I bet they're going to be very grateful though if the business doesn't survive and they have incorporated and they're not personally liable.
Well,
I think make the point, Ian.
I know, but yeah, these are irrational comments that are coming from very scared people.
Yeah. And I think, just going back to, I don't mean to be dismissive about the insolvency legislation at all, but trust me, when you're talking to a director, you as the accountant, I think providing them with reassurance and comfort is, I'm sure that it already is your main point of concern, but to talk to them and say, I'm recommending you to Joe Bloggs, who's an insolvency practitioner. this is how they work. Give them a bit of an intro, and they're going to protect your backside. Not unless you're a criminal, they're not. But as long as you've done things by the book, you've got your mitigating circumstances, you've minuted everything, you've recorded everything, and I think you're in good hands.
One thing I've taken away from this is I wasn't really aware of this 2-year rule. Now we've got, most of our clients will pay an interim dividend.
Yeah.
That's minuted with reference to the last account and the management accounts. We make a point of noting the reserves position, and we also make a point of saying that at the point of the dividend, there are no other sort of adverse circumstances that the directors are aware of. I've always felt comfortable that would protect my clients, but I'm now thinking maybe I didn't realise that would even be challenged at all.
No.
I think if I can make a comment there, Ian, like when I produce my own forecasts, I know I'm mad when I believe them. There's all sorts of things that occur in relation to accounts, and all sorts of liabilities creep out the woodwork when a company fails. And it's far, whilst it is a degree of protection, it's obviously the right thing to document things and make sure you've got all the right planks in the right place. But there's going to be some tough times ahead, and it would be far better to explain to them kind of, hey, this is the better way to do it, and it might cost you a few bob, but at the end of the day, would you rather have paid the tax or rather be repaying the dividends?
Yes.
And give them the opportunity to make their decision.
Yeah, of course, it's their call. Yeah, it's up to them. But yeah, okay, okay.
Right, Nikki, I have to go. I've got a call at 12:15.
I raised my hand just then. I wasn't sort of clapping, actually, although they're wonderful points. I was just raising my hand to sort of warn everybody that I am going to close the meeting unless Helena or Richard, you have any other questions.
I was just
really useful, thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad it helped. And try and join one of our next ones. We're going to have them every week for 26 weeks.
Nikki, I can't remember the lady that was talking about cash flow forecast. I've got a 3-year forecast on an Excel spreadsheet. So, and it's without sounding like I'm blowing my own trumpet, it's really good.
It was Amanda.
It was me that raised the cash flow, because one of the things that
Helena.
One of the things that I said was that what we had done as directors was we've actually, when I read everything that came out at the beginning, and about the bank loans, one of the things I said to my directors was, I think we should apply for this now while the situation is really healthy. We shouldn't be waiting 2-3 months down the line and waiting to see what's happening to the market, to what's happening to our business stream, etc. We should apply for it now while we're good and healthy and get it in place. And our cash flow, we submitted a cash flow with our application yesterday, and we've done it for 12 months, and we've seen it, we think it needs minimum 12 to 18 months to look at how we will get back to where we are.
Normality,
Plan for longer rather than shorter, Helena. Plan to survive in the short term. Whatever you do in the short term. So get your application in, apply for whatever grants you can get, survive short term.
And that's what we said, we followed staff as well. So we followed our staff. We've kept the account staff on to make sure we're chasing money that is due. And, we're keeping, I'm on, and a couple of the other staff are on, and that is it. On the basis of doing everything, we're in construction consultancy, so everything has stopped. Basically, we've got some small projects look like they're beginning to start again, because the mixed messages coming out from government are that construction, Scotland has said completely stop, but in England it is, no, you should be constructing if you can. So it's, as long as you can achieve the 2 metre social distance, you should be constructing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can I make the point as well, just so as you're aware, Helen, beside the furloughing that you can do, you can also put people on short-term working. That's still available. So it's another arrow in your quiver, as it were.
How does that work, Richard?
Well, basically, you can lay them off for minimum of 13 weeks. And put them onto short-term working, but after 13 weeks, they also have the right to claim a redundancy payment from you.
Okay.
It's very simply, it's a little bit more complex than that, but it gives you another term. But I think you'll find that the furloughing, from what I'm beginning to hear, is likely to be extended for a period of time.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
the government is going to want to get people back to work. They've got to get people back to work.
Yeah, we're hoping that the following will be sufficient. So,
yeah, what I'd like to let you all know is that following this, we will be circulating a recording of this webinar, but we will also add in that message the contact details for V, Richard and Frank. And I believe that all three of them have very kindly agreed to provide a certain amount of time free of charge advice, obviously not on specifics, but just guidance under no obligation. So we will make their contact details available to everyone who attended this. And then obviously you will be welcome to follow up with each, any or all of them.
thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Nikki.
Nikki.
All right,
Well
thank you so much for coming. Thank you for all your expertise, and hopefully see you at another one.
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.